Maybe I'll kill somebody else, When somebody says to me, I think maybe I need another body, why? Again, come back to the purpose.
Hello, this is Louise Dean, founder of the Novelry, the world's best loved school for writers, with more 5-star reviews than any other and a whole bunch of published success stories. As an award-winning Booker-listed author, I founded the Novelry to help writers avoid the frustrations of writing solo for years by getting wise eyes on the most important element of writing right from the get-go. Story, story, story. And this is our podcast to give you everything you need for happy writing. This is the Novelry on Writing.
Hi, I'm Sorcha Rose and I'm an editor here at the Novelry and I specialise in crime and thriller.
Hi, I'm Amanda Reynolds. I'm an author of psychological thrillers and author coach at the Novelry of crime and suspense.
So today we have the exciting task of talking about the 5 keys to suspenseful stories. Crime and thriller especially needs lots of suspense, but this goes across lots of different genres, doesn't it, Amanda?
Absolutely, yeah.
So should we kick off with our first one?
Yeah, so the first one is to pull the reader in right from the start. Mm-hmm. And I know this is something that is quite difficult to do, but I always aim to do that right from the beginning of the story, because we're really up against it, aren't we, as authors and as editors reading as well, in terms of there's so much that people can go and do now. They can go and watch Netflix and they can be on their phones. So we've got to grab their attention really from that, I was going to say first page, but, I think it's even first line, isn't it?
Definitely. And I think, especially as an editor thinking about going on submission, if that's what you're trying to get an agent, interested in your story, you've got to make it so compelling. And I think some people think you can't go back to the opening and finesse that, but that's the part that you probably finesse the most to make it the most compelling. And some different ways you can do that. Maybe add in a prologue of your killer or something to come in. That's always really great.
People are always worried about prologues. I sometimes get questions from writers, is it okay to have a prologue? And there's almost this sort of urban myth that prologues are hated and, we mustn't have a prologue because it's an immediate turn off. But I would say, first of all, as a reader, I love a prologue. How do you feel about prologues?
Yeah, I do love a prologue. I think as an editor, sometimes it's really great to get into the action sooner. Like if you can see the murder or a killing or someone watching someone in the bushes and then you don't know who that voice is and you're working out the whole book, that's already offering up so much mystery and suspense from the very opening. So yeah, it is so important.
Yeah, I mean, what we want to do as authors, as writers, is make sure that even if somebody picks up the book, just out of curiosity, that there's no way they're ever going to not read on.
Yeah.
So right from that very, very beginning, our first key is definitely to pull the reader in. And as you say, I think you can do that with a prologue, but I think you can also do it with... It doesn't necessarily have to be a big thing, does it? I mean, sometimes I think as writers, we think we have to reinvent, we have to come up with something so huge, so amazing, so different. But what we really need to do is pull on that curiosity right from the beginning. Have you got ways that you kind of, with authors, suggest as an editor that you really do drag people in right from the start of a story?
Yeah, as an editor, we really focus on the question of your novel. What is your reader reading to find out? That's so essential. And so many times with people, we're like, you need to get that into the opening. Your first 3 chapters, they've got to be, I've got to know exactly what the stakes are. I've got to know what I'm coming in for, the excitement of the ride. And sometimes they're like, oh no, but that comes in chapter 5. But as we said, what happens if they don't get to chapter 5?
Yeah.
Then what's the point? So it's about bringing it forwards, bringing in the excitement. Don't leave it for chapter 5, 6, 7. They might not get there.
It feels a bit counterintuitive, I think, that, almost like you're giving too much away. And I think particularly in suspense, we sometimes think we've got to keep it back. We've got to keep the secrets. That's what's suspenseful. But I think letting the reader in a little bit right at the beginning and saying there's something, even the promise of something really, really, say, dark or deep or difficult here or threatening is absolutely what we're aiming for. So yeah, our first tip is definitely pull your reader in right from the beginning. And I'm thinking of something like Girl on the Train, where the first line, we are on the train with the girl and she sees the clothes on the side of the track. And I always remember opening that book and being so excited. And it was one of the books that I would sort of steal time. I'd be standing up doing something else and reading that book. And I read it. I'm not a fast reader. a lot of authors, I think, aren't. I mean, thank goodness editors are, but a lot of authors aren't.
Yeah.
That, you know, I remember stealing time to read that book because I had to keep going. I had to know what it was. And it wasn't that it was being held back. It was that it was being revealed piece by piece. But I'm not going to go too much into that because we're going to come onto that. So once we've got the reader, hopefully by the scruff of the collar, and say, come along for the ride. Our next tip to our writers is to keep up that pace.
Yes, pace is so essential. I think as an editor, that's the thing I bring up the most. And it almost, people think it's a science of like, oh, you know, how do I do it? You know, how do I look at it and everything like that? But it's all about just making sure that there's really exciting reveals happening, you know, in crime and thriller, lots of breadcrumbs and things like that for the investigation to keep people interested. You know, again, it's about the main question of your novel. Are you actually feeding into that, or are you talking about a character who's not even relevant? You know, I think that's really important with pace. But what about you when you're writing your books? How do you think about pace?
I mean, one thing that you said when we did a workshop together, it was really stuck in my mind, and it's another P word, and it's purpose. And you said, you know, I'm always using that word. I'm always saying, what's the purpose of this? And I think it's such a good stress test, because we tend to think that a novel is like very, very long. We have a lot of space. We don't.
No.
Literally everything has to earn its place, and it has to have a purpose. And I think that really keys into the whole idea of pace. And I think it's important to look at each scene that we write and think, how is that propelling the story forward? And how is it keeping the pace up? And the word pace can be a little bit difficult because it makes it feel like it needs to be a car chase, you know, a rattling through the story. And we do need those landing spaces. Well, we need the space between the pace, don't we, as well? So how do you sort of, as an editor, kind of look at pace, and what advice would you be giving to people about not only the relentlessness of the pace, but also those spaces where we kind of allow the plot to breathe and for people to really absorb what's going on as well?
Yeah, I think what you said is so important about it doesn't have to be breakneck speed the whole time. I think, especially in crime and thriller, they're like, has to be life or death all the time. No one wants that. We all need a break. We all need a moment to be like, okay, get ourselves back into it. And I think I always say to people, like, give big moments space. You know, don't have like one massive reveal happen, then another one, then another one. I think that can be overwhelming for your reader, and that can disengage them, even if you think that you're making something really exciting. I think what I say to people when they're in the planning stages, or if you're reviewing your novel, if you've got a few drafts on you and it still feels like the pace isn't working, look at all of your reveals and the level of your reveals. Because sometimes it's something so small. It's just like a new character, or sometimes it's the murderer. And it's about making sure that they're all spaced out. There's all the high ones aren't all together. There's not too much intensity, and then making them pace out. And that will help you think about pace. I think it is really hard. I don't know about you as an author, but when you're reading your own book, to really work out pace. Yeah. Because you're so close to it. Yeah. So I think that is difficult. But I think really looking at it as, you know, what happens in this chapter? Has something happened in this one? And if you find that you've got 5 chapters and nothing's happened in terms of reveals and things like that, that will drop the pace naturally.
Yeah. I also think it's about slowing down in those big moments is amazing. I always remember, I think it was in a Kate Atkinson book, where she really slowed down the moment of impact, physical impact in a car crash. And there was that tension of knowing that it was coming, but not knowing how it was going to actually, you know, be revealed and pan out. And that was amazing. But I think in terms of looking at your own novel and thinking about pace, don't ever put things in for the sake of it. Sometimes I'm sure you've come across this as well. I know I've done it myself, where I think I don't have enough, you know, so maybe I'll kill somebody else, you know, or maybe I'll have, I don't know, this person needs to do something much more dramatic. Just be careful, I would say, of those moments, because, you know, when somebody says to me, I think maybe I need another body, why? Again, come back to the purpose. What's the purpose of the extra body? Or is it that maybe you're having a little bit of a confidence wobble about pace, and just look at the pace in a different way? Like you say, you know, what are the reveals? Are we giving the reader enough credit so that they can join in with this and they can kind of pick up on the reveals as well?
So the next sort of tip that we have for you are characters to root for, which I think is incredibly important for me as an editor, and also just my personal taste. I love character-focused books. So I've got to love your character, otherwise I'm not going to love your book. So when you're writing, how do you sort of come out with characters that you love, or is there any books that there's a character maybe who's surprisingly that you root for, even though you shouldn't. I think in crime and thriller, this happens a lot where people think, they're like, oh, but it's a murderer. How's anyone going to like them? It's like American Psycho. He was very charismatic,
I think that word charisma actually is really helpful. So if we think about people that maybe we're drawn to and really interested in, and we kind of want to get under their skin and we want to understand them, but we wouldn't necessarily have them to dinner, say, in our home, and maybe if they were on the bus, we'd sit next to someone else, but they are super interesting. So, and also for me, I love writing characters that say things that I would love to say, but never. It's such good fun to kind of put...
Good therapy, that.
It's great fun to put in, to embody in a character all those kind of delicious, sometimes snarky things. Like we all think, but obviously we're way too polite to say. So I love getting into a character who is kind of on the edge of society. Maybe they're different, maybe they're misunderstood, or maybe they are somebody who isn't fitting in for whatever reason, good or bad. And, I don't think we necessarily need to love that person, but we do need to care enough about them. The example that I sometimes use in coaching is, if the guy is hanging by his fingertips from the edge of the cliff, then I need to understand enough about him to care whether he scrabbles back up and is saved, or otherwise just let him go. That's fine. So we need that investment. We don't necessarily need to think that they are a great person or they're making great decisions, or that we would like them if we knew them or admire what they've done. But, if we were to put ourselves in their extraordinary circumstance, is there any part of us that would behave in the same way and can maybe understand why they do what they do? And, if we were protecting a loved one, or we were protecting our own life, or the world has gone crazy, what situation would it be that we would understand? And that's then where I try to get in the psyche of the character. And I think, we're all fascinated with kind of true crime podcasts and, series on TV about this kind of thing, because we want to understand that most of us abide by the rules. So these people who don't, what is it that's happened? What's changed that they've crossed a line that none of us
what's the
will?
Motivation? That is something that's so important. You need to understand. I think so many times they're senseless killers and things, and people won't invest in that person. They need to understand why someone's going to kill someone, or for revenge, or, all the different horrible things that happen in crime and thriller that are super fun. But you need to have motivation for doing it. And I know that we've discussed many times before about How to Kill Your Family, and how, the main character of Bella Mackey's book, so many people say to me, oh, I hate that book because the person's so unlikable, the character's so unlikable, the main character. And it's like, I just don't understand what you mean, because we know exactly why she's doing what she's doing. It's for revenge. That's set up so early on. It's not a secret. It's not waiting to the end to find out why she's doing it. It's set up, and you just go along for the ride, for the fun of it. And I think that's a really great book, and very voicey book, where that is a character you really want to invest in. And also, you're investing in her doing really awful things. And you sort of check yourself for a minute. Am I a really terrible person, or is this person just a really good author? Like, really convinced me here.
Yeah, I love how dark Bella Mackey took that. There's no compunction about actually saying what she did, why she did it, how many people she killed, really right from the start. There is a great twist as well, which is brilliant. And sometimes when I'm coaching, people will say, oh, is it too dark? How dark can I go? And I literally say, go as dark as you want, because we can always rein it back in. But try to be as brave as you possibly can. Really, really push it. There's definitely an editorial note that I've had in my work is like, make it bigger, make it more. Because if it's too much, we can pull it back. But just push it and see how far you can take it. Do those kind of what if questions and just see how dark we can turn this story. And I'm always up for that as a coach. I love that. That's my favorite bit. If someone says how dark, I say, tell me what you're thinking. Let's have that.
No shame here, just let it all out.
Absolutely not. Let's go to the dark side together, definitely.
With courses, coaching and community, the Novelry is the world's top-rated writing course. With our 5-step program, you'll come up with the idea for a novel you can't wait to write, then you'll write a finished draft, and you'll edit your novel into a book that readers will love. A Big 5 publishing editor will review your novel and will take you through to leading literary agencies with our fast-track submission process. So, if you've got a book in you and you've never found the right time to write it, now there's a good place. Come on over to the Novelry. Beginners welcome. We'll show you how to start, coach your story into shape, and cheer you on to type the end.
Okay, so tip number 4, we've got breadcrumb trail. What does that mean to you, Sorcha?
Well, it means sort of what we've already been talking about with like different reveals and hints and clues, you know, in an investigation, say whether that's, you know, an amateur sleuth or a detective, you know, they're always going to be finding hints and clues. And that's almost like the building of the breadcrumbs of suspense. You know, we might not know exactly what that clue is hinting at, but it comes up later, and it's about making sure that you have enough that gets your reader invested in your story. We all think we could solve any murder. People are fully convinced of this, you know, and I know so many people who say, oh, I hate this book because I couldn't see how it ended. And that's not what you want. You sort of want it to come from somewhere. So that's where the breadcrumbs of suspense happen, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a really good analogy, the breadcrumb, because it conjures a picture, doesn't it, of sort of walking through the forest and picking up the breadcrumbs and collecting them. And we need to trust our readers, don't we? We need to assume that they are sophisticated readers, because they are. They're absorbing a lot of content, as we said. So they are excellent detectives, which in a way makes our job harder, which is good because it should be. But also, I think we need to give them a shot, don't we? We need to say, we're not going to hold everything back to the end because that's annoying and you may not finish the book. Yeah. What we're going to do is we're going to reward your investment. So every now and then we're going to give you something, and you will think, I know. And maybe you do and maybe you don't, but you know a bit more. Yeah. I always love when I read like early reviews of my book, and I guarantee always someone who says, well, I knew, of course, right from the beginning. And I'm thinking, well, that's great because I didn't. So it's really good that you did. But I actually don't mind that, because I think what it means is that person is really already playing detective right from the beginning. So I think the breadcrumb trail is a really great one, particularly when you're planning as well, to think about what breadcrumbs am I going to drop. And the other thing about breadcrumbs is foreshadowing, isn't it?
Yeah, big one. Foreshadowing is so important because, again, you don't want your reader to be like, oh, that was really strange or feels out of character. You want to be laying the groundwork. And most of the time, I think people don't realize when they're writing their first books, especially, is you've got to give your reader a lot more credit, as we've said. They are so much smarter than you think. They pick up on the smallest of things. Yeah. I don't know about you, but you read a book, and as you say, it's like you put it in your back pocket. You're like, that was strange. That was out of character. Something's not quite right here. Don't know what it is, but I'm willing to go on the journey to find out what it is. And you've got to make sure that if you are foreshadowing something, that you follow through. Nothing's worse than foreshadowing something and being like, what happened to so-and-so? Where's the dog? And then nothing happens.
They went upstairs and that was it. We never saw them again.
They were gone forever. Yeah, that doesn't really work.
Yeah, because as you say, readers are really savvy. So when they read a book and there's a gun in a drawer, even if it's so briefly mentioned, they know that there is significance. And at some point, that gun, famously Chekhov's, will come down off the wall or out the drawer and will be fired. Yeah. So what we can do as writers and editors, I think, to use that is say, just really do it very lightly, lightness of touch, because readers are clever and they will park it. They'll remember that. And then later on, when we come back and it becomes significant, they'll think, I should have realised I knew that. And it makes sense as well. It kind of feels satisfying to them because it's like, yeah, I knew that was important. I picked up on that, you know, which is great. We're in this together then with the reader, and they're working alongside us as well. Yeah. And a lot of that, I mean, it sounds like, you know, you start page 1 with this incredible inciting incident and you drop all these breadcrumb trails and it's all easy. But a lot of it comes later, doesn't it? You know, further drafts down the line, which obviously you are dealing with a lot in your role as well.
Yeah, again, it's about not being afraid to go back through and being like, have I made this obvious enough? Your editor almost is, I would say, I'm your first reader almost. You know, if I'm saying to you, oh, I don't understand why this happened because you haven't foreshadowed it, it's not because it's not possible to put that in your book, but it's because you're not showing it to me. I'm just taking everything from reading your story. So it needs to be there on the page. You know, I think people get afraid of putting too much on the page. But, you know, your readers are smart. They want to have some nice breadcrumbs, so make sure that you're delivering on that, definitely.
Yeah, and I remember, well, particularly early on, I think I still do this to a certain extent, is when I get editorial notes, I'm like, oh, I should have known. I failed. I should have realised. Why did I not spot, what Sorcha spotted? And I think just to kind of reassure anyone who does feel like me that it's some sort of failing in them, this is part of the process, isn't it?
Of course. I think editing isn't for everyone, but you've got to take it all on board. And it's not always going to come in that first draft. Shall we get to our last tip, which is great for a last tip?
It is, yeah.
It's satisfying endings. And what we mean by this is, your reader shouldn't be shocked. We've touched on this a bit. Your reader shouldn't be shocked by the ending. The murderer shouldn't be someone who's literally been on the page for about 3 times and we don't know anything about them, or they come in right at the end as a new character. That's super annoying. I don't know how many times where people, they send me their drafts and I'm like, but why is it them? And it's like, because they didn't see it coming. I said, but you will have pitchforks. People will be angry. And readers do get angry. Look at those Amazon reviews. So, people, they aren't shy.
One thing that was said to me years ago, which has stuck with me about endings, is that readers will pretty much forgive you anything except a bad ending. And because that's what they remember. That's what you leave them with. So obviously we want to set things up. We want a beautiful beginning, middle and end. But the end is really important. And it's something that I work on a lot. And I don't necessarily know what my ending's going to be. I'm a massive fan of a last... when you think everything's wrapped up and you get to the last page, I love, like in books like Louise Doughty's Apple Tree Yard, where almost everything is upturned by literally the last page. I adore that. So I definitely look to try and do that myself. Even if it's not a big thing, it doesn't necessarily have to flip everything, but I love the thought that you leave the reader with that question that they then immediately take to social media and say, who's read this? Because I need to talk to you about it. That thing that you can kind of chew over with your friends and say, do you think then? So I love that kind of satisfying final coda as well.
And I love what you said. It doesn't have to be some big dramatic ending, because if your story is not that, if your book or your story is not that sort of book that makes sense for it to happen, don't just kill everyone because that's surprising.
Machine gun them all
yeah,
down,
just like that. People, love a dramatic ending like that when they're writing. But realistically, those aren't the books that we remember. As you said, it's those books where just the last, you see how long they can eke it out. You're like, I've got 3 pages left and we haven't got to the end, and that's really exciting. So we definitely want people to be surprised, but not shocked.
Not shocked. No, we don't want the kind of the robot did it unless the robot's been in the book all the way through. So exactly as you say, we don't want page 300, somebody comes in that no one's met until this point. So we want lots of foreshadowing, and we want all of those 5 keys to suspenseful stories.
Working all together. But this has been so fun, Amanda, and
great.
hopefully
I think we could talk forever about
I
this.
know. Suspense is so important, and hopefully these keys are going to help everyone. But thank you very much, and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you for joining us today. We're so pleased to have you along for the writing journey, and we hope to see you on another episode of The Novelry on Writing. If you'd like to learn more, visit us at thenovelry.com. From first draft to finished manuscript, at The Novelry you'll enjoy one-to-one coaching from best-selling authors, live writing classes with award-winning authors and literary agents, and you'll work with a publishing editor all the way for submission to literary agents toward a publishing deal. All writers learn from other writers, even the greats. Write your novel in good company. Join us at The Novelry. We'll show you how to start, coax your story into shape, cheer you on to type the end.